In 1974, a man walked out of a jungle in the Philippines. He was armed. He was in full military uniform. He was ready to fight. The problem: the war had ended 29 years earlier. He did not know. Nobody had given him the order he believed he needed, and for decades he kept going. Today, I am going to tell you the story of Hiroo Onoda, a Japanese soldier who did not surrender when the Second World War ended, because in his mind, the mission was still active. This is not a simple story of madness or ignorance. It is a story about obedience, belief, isolation, pride, survival, and the terrifying power of an order that never gets canceled. And by the end of this video, you may ask yourself a question that is harder than it sounds. Would I have done the same? December 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor and enters the war against the Allies. The entire nation mobilizes, and millions of young men are pulled into a conflict that spreads across the Pacific. Hiroo Onoda is one of them. He is 19 years old, the son of a military family, raised in a culture where duty is not just a word, it is identity. For him, defeat is not an option. Surrender is not an inconvenience. It is shame, failure, and dishonor. Onoda is trained for intelligence and guerrilla warfare. He is not meant to fight like an ordinary frontline soldier. He is meant to hide, observe, sabotage, survive, and continue the mission even if everything around him collapses.
That training matters because Onoda is not lost in the jungle by accident. He has been taught to think like a man behind enemy lines. If a message looks too convenient, doubt it. If surrender is suggested by the enemy, reject it. If the situation becomes impossible, keep the mission alive anyway. In December 1944, he is sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines. His superior, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, gives him an order that will define the rest of his life. He is told not to surrender. He is told to continue fighting until his commander returns. In Onoda's mind, that order is official, direct, and absolute. There is no expiration date attached to it, no condition that says, if Japan loses, stop. No simple way for Onoda to decide on his own that the order has ended. That is what makes this story so dangerous. The command is clear, but the ending is not. Onoda replies, "Yes, sir." And from that moment, the jungle becomes his post. But only a few months later, on August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender by radio. The war is over. Across Japan, millions of people hear a voice many had never heard before. Cities are burned. The empire has collapsed. Families are grieving. Soldiers everywhere are being told to lay down their weapons. Except, Onoda never accepts it. On Lubang, the message reaches him only through leaflets, rumors, and voices he believes could be enemy deception. From the outside, that sounds absurd. From inside his training, it has a terrible logic. If the enemy wants you to surrender, they will say anything. If they print a leaflet, they can fake the government order. If they call your name, they may be waiting with rifles.
Lubang, 1945. Onoda and 3 other soldiers push deep into the forest. They survive by hunting, stealing food from nearby villages, and building hidden shelters under the trees. They fight rain, heat, insects, disease, and hunger. Every sound matters. Every trail could be watched. Every stranger could be a trap. Their world gets smaller. A village path becomes a battlefield. A cooking fire becomes a risk. A farmer in a field becomes a possible informant. They live in a state of permanent alert, and after enough time, permanent alert begins to feel normal. Then the first shock comes. Planes drop leaflets over the jungle saying the war is over and telling the soldiers to surrender. Onoda reads one. He studies it. Then he decides it is propaganda, a trick designed to pull them out of hiding. So he throws it away, and he keeps going. The years pass. The men around him disappear one by one. In 1949, one of the group deserts and eventually surrenders. In 1954, another companion, Shoichi Shimada, is killed. In 1972, Onoda's last remaining comrade, Kenshichi Kozuka, is shot dead during a clash with local police. Every loss should have been evidence that the mission was hopeless, but for Onoda, Each loss can be interpreted another way. The enemy is still active, the danger is real, therefore the war must still be real. Now Onoda is alone with his rifle, alone with his memories, alone with an order from 1944 that nobody in the jungle can cancel. This is the psychological center of the story. He is not just hiding from other people, he is trapped inside a system of meaning where surrender would make every sacrifice pointless. But the strangest part is not only that he stayed, it is that people were trying to bring him back.
Leaflets are dropped. Search teams enter the island. Family members send messages. People call his name and tell him the war is over. Every time, Onoda doubts it. Why would he trust the enemy? Why would he trust a leaflet? Why would he trust a voice shouting from the trees? Even messages from relatives cannot fully break through. If a family letter appears in the jungle, he can tell himself it was forced, copied, staged, or manipulated. The more the world tries to convince him, the more elaborate the trap seems. While he survives in the jungle, the world outside changes completely. Japan rebuilds itself from ruins and becomes an economic powerhouse. The Beatles become famous. Humans land on the moon. Television becomes part of everyday life. The modern world arrives. And Onoda is still cutting bamboo, repairing old gear, watching paths, and waiting for an order. That contrast is what makes the story feel unreal. While the world becomes modern, Onoda's calendar is stuck in 1945. He is not measuring time by elections, inventions, albums, or moon launches. He is measuring time by patrols, hiding places, and survival. In 1959, the Japanese government officially declares him dead. His family mourns. His story becomes almost impossible to believe. Then, in 1972, after Kozuka is killed, Japan realizes that Onoda may still be alive. His face returns to newspapers. Search teams go back to Lubang. But he hides again. To him, every rescue attempt looks like a trap built by people who do not understand his duty. The people searching for him think they are offering rescue. Onoda thinks he is resisting capture. Both sides believe they are acting rationally, and that is why the standoff lasts so long.
Then, in 1974, a 23-year-old Japanese student named Norio Suzuki decides to do what governments and search parties have failed to do. He travels to Lubang and looks for Onoda. Not with an army, not with a command unit, just a backpacker with a strange mission. And somehow, Suzuki finds him. Suzuki's success is almost unbelievable because he approaches Onoda less like a military target and more like a human being. He is curious, patient, and strange enough to step outside the official pattern that Onoda expects. They talk. Suzuki tells him the war has been over for nearly 3 decades. Onoda listens, but he does not surrender. His answer is simple. He cannot abandon his post with official orders from his superior. Suzuki returns to Japan with proof. The Japanese government tracks down Major Taniguchi, the former commander who had given the original order. Taniguchi is no longer a wartime officer in the field. He is retired and working as a bookseller. But he agrees to return to the Philippines. Think about that image for a second. The man who once gave a wartime order is now surrounded by books, living in a country transformed by peace. Yet one sentence he spoke in 1944 is still alive in a jungle hundreds of miles away. March 9th, 1974. Lubang Island. Major Taniguchi stands before Onoda in the forest. He reads the official order aloud. Hiroo Onoda is relieved of all military duties. Onoda freezes. The words he has waited for finally exist. Not as a rumor, not as a leaflet, not as a trick, as an order from the man whose voice he still recognizes. For almost 30 years, he has protected the mission by refusing every unofficial message. Now the message comes through the only channel he still accepts. He removes his helmet. He lays down his rifle.
he stands still for a long moment. And for the first time in decades, the war inside his mind ends. Onoda surrenders his sword and weapon to Philippine authorities. He apologizes for the deaths and violence caused during his years on the island. By then, the story has two truths at once. One truth is that Onoda survived an impossible ordeal with discipline that is hard to comprehend. The other truth is that civilians on Lubang had paid for that ordeal with fear, property, and lives. The President of the Philippines grants him a pardon. Back in Japan, he is welcomed by many as a symbol of loyalty and endurance. But the story is not clean. On Lubang, people had lived with fear, raids, shootings, and loss. For them, Onoda was not just a mythic soldier. He was part of a painful local history. That is what makes this story powerful. It is not only heroic. It is tragic. It is human. Onoda later said that every soldier he faced was doing his duty, and so was he. That sentence can sound noble, but it can also sound frightening. It forces the uncomfortable question at the heart of the story. When does loyalty become blindness? When does discipline become a prison? And how long can a person keep obeying an order after the world that created it has vanished? Because duty can hold a person together, and it can also trap them. Right now, you might think this is impossible. You might think nobody could keep fighting a war that ended decades ago. But ask yourself this: how many people still live inside battles that ended long ago? A relationship that is over, but you still defend yourself every day. A job that stopped making sense, but you keep waiting for permission to leave.
A belief you inherited so deeply that you never stop to ask whether it is still true. Onoda was waiting for an order from Taniguchi. Maybe you are waiting for a sign, for validation, or for someone to say it is okay to let go. But sometimes that order never comes, and the jungle becomes your entire life. That is why Onoda's story stays with people. It is not only about one man in one forest. It is about the human need for permission to stop, to change, and to admit that the battle we organized our life around may already be over. Hiroo Onoda died in 2014 at the age of 91. In his later years, he taught wilderness survival skills to young people in Japan. He insisted he had done his duty. He carried the story until the end of his life. So tell me in the comments, what would you have done in his place? And if this story hit you the way I think it did, share it, because everyone should know the story of the man who waited for the war to end long after the world had moved on.